between the wealthiest and the average American is likely to be a major theme of the upcoming U.S. elections. Now, to continue our discussion on American income inequality is Julianne Melvo. She's a labor economist and commentator from the U.S. state of Michigan. Lisa Cook, she is an economics and international relations professor at Michigan State University. And Eric Olin Wright joins us from the U.S. state of Wisconsin. He's a sociologist and professor at the University of Wisconsin. Lisa, I want to start with you again. And Julianne Melvo just spoke a moment ago of this concept of class envy, people being very envious of those whom we are told, of those being very successful and rich. And we also hear something else from the rich and the powerful, and they extol the virtues of something known as trickle-down economics, that people at the top will get rich, and that will trickle down, that success will trickle down to the guys at the bottom. Has it worked? Will it ever work?
Well, I'll go back to our discussion of the minimum wage to give an example of how this is not working. So I think one of the most interesting and ridiculous news stories that we were following in the last year was the McDonald's budget that was posted. And apparently McDonald's has become interested in personal finance and is trying to get its workers to budget better. But when they did the math, they showed that there was a significant deficit. If they continued to work at McDonald's, they couldn't live on what McDonald's was paying per hour, and they would need to apply for federal assistance, for public assistance. So I think that the biggest person who is losing in this game is the American taxpayer, because what we do is we fund all of this public assistance. The corporations reap the profits from paying these workers too little, and the shareholders receive the largesse from these corporations, and the taxpayers wind up paying the bill. That's why I would like to see the minimum wage raised, so that taxpayers are not the ones bearing the brunt of this income inequality. It's already growing for median households. Between 1990, the median household income fell. Increased 7%, and by 2000, between 2000 and 2010, it had fallen by 0.7%. So we are worried about the middle, and we are worried about the policies, and trickle down is not working in that sense. Now, I would offer a slightly different suggestion too, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
I also work on the economics of innovation.
Yeah.
Now, technological progress, for many experts, one of the largest contributors to earnings inequality is technological progress. So what does that mean? Is this something that we should sit idly by and watch happen? No, it's something that actually our policymakers can do something about. Science and math education. And it's not, I'm not suggesting that this is the only thing that one can do. I mean, again, my first argument was that the minimum wage needed to rise.
Yeah.
But I think that many more people have to be included in the science and engineering workforce, or the innovation economy, as we call it. Women and minorities are quite excluded from this, and I think that there certainly needs to be a bigger push for more science and math education and more inclusiveness, because this is where the incomes are rising most quickly.
Okay, great. Eric, I will come to you in a moment. Julianne, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to just support and talk a little bit more about the point Lisa made about the implicit subsidies that we're giving to a Walmart, a McDonald's. Many of these, and I don't call them out, the list goes on. But when you're paying someone less than a living wage, they're going to eat using food stamps. They're going to have Section 8 housing, perhaps. They're going to have subsidies. So these policymakers refuse to do their work up front. And that means that we as the taxpayers are paying for their failure to address these issues after the fact. So I don't think that we've ever gone through and looked at this set of implicit subsidies that are provided to these companies who are not paying their workers.
So the wage burden is being picked up by the state, by the taxpayer.
Exactly.
Right? Eric, you wanted to say.
Yes, I wanted to make a comment on the issue of education, particularly science and technology, STEM type education and the associated jobs. I think it has relatively little to do with the fantastic run-up of CEO incomes, earnings, and the gap between the 1% and the median. I'm all in favor of better training programs, better access to higher education, and so on, but it is not the fundamental issue in play in explaining the degree to which inequality has grown at the top. That has much more to do with the way power is being wielded with respect to the very process by which incomes are generated. CEOs are able to set their own income. They have power to control the wage offers to others, and because of the deregulation of both labor markets and capital markets in the United States and the decline of unions, they can get away with it. Productivity has grown dramatically in the United States.
I think most economists would agree. Many economic experts have pointed to the largest contributor of wage inequality over the last 3 decades as being technological progress.
Yeah, but not between the 1% and the median. Not between the 1% and the median.
But I would suggest that this is extremely important. It is going to become even more important. And to your point about the penalty for not catching up, certainly if many of these incomes are going to tech entrepreneurs, not just CEOs of any companies, but CEOs of these types of companies, I think that there is a lot of room for policy intervention to encourage.
I don't know if we're dancing around it or not a non-profit. One of the things that we really haven't mentioned.
Eric, I'll get to you in a moment.
Finance.
One moment, Eric, I'll get to you. Julianne, you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're dancing around this deliberately or not, but one of the things, in light of what's happened with the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, that we might mention is the extent to which jobs, especially low to moderate income jobs, are being exported. And that extent to which then people who are minimum wage at $7.25, as low as it is still perhaps higher than the wage someplace else, and so it's easy to export. So I don't think we can ignore that. I think it often sounds a little xenophobic to raise it, because we're not saying we're against, or I'm not certainly saying that I'm against global cooperation, but we do have to look at what happens to our workers when we have these trade agreements that makes unemployment even higher. They haven't been able to pass the TAA, trade adjustment assistance, which would make it easier for workers. So I do think that's something we have to talk about.
All right, Eric?
Absolutely.
Well, if we're shifting to the trade issue, in one sense, I don't regret crappy, low-paid jobs going abroad. What we need are not more. We don't need retention of bad, low-paid jobs in the United States. We need the creation of well-paid jobs, including well-paid jobs for people with relatively little education. I think that's impossible. It's impossible to rely on the market to accomplish that. The market, there's vast amounts of things that need to be done in the United States that don't require lots of skills and which the market is not going to create jobs for. I think we need to have a reinvigorated public sector that provides real employment at living wages to deal with the problem at the low end of the labor market.
Okay, Eric, we have a minute left. Julianne, I want to address something, and we heard at the beginning of this segment of the show Hillary Clinton talking about income inequality. She's made it the centerpiece of her opening speech. Is something going to be done about this, or are we just going to be election rhetoric and we're back to normal after that?
Well, heretofore, it's been election rhetoric. We have to thank Elizabeth Warren for pushing Senator Clinton, quite frankly, to the left on this. But what I still haven't heard from people, and Eric makes a really good point, I haven't heard, so what? So we can all recite the facts, they're there. So what kind of programs do we have to generate better jobs? What kind of programs do we have? As Lisa says, she's absolutely right about technology and innovation. So how are we fast-tracking people at the periphery in terms of innovation? I haven't heard this from any of the candidates, not in the Democratic Party, not in the Republican Party, and you hear people with the frustration that we just heard from the gentleman at the top